Hello everyone, welcome to another C# video. In this video we're going to talk about a scope in C#. In the previous video we spoke about variables, data types, and how to define a variable. So the scope of a variable determines the accessibility of a variable or the accessibility of the variable to a particular part of application. So the keyword is accessibility, defines the accessibility of the variable. When we defined a variable in our program, that variable is not accessible or reachable throughout the application. So that variable is accessible within a particular block of code or area of application. Okay, so we have basically three levels of scope in C#. We have class level scope, we have method level scope, we have block level scope. When we define a variable, basically we can define a variable either within a class, within a method, or within a loop block, or within a block of code. So basically, what do we mean by block of code? A block of code starts with an opening curly brace and ending curly brace. Within this block of code or opening and ending curly brace, we have multiple statements or a bunch of codes. So that codes will have the scope of that block or opening and curly braces. When we define a class in our program, so basically we give the class keyword and class name. So here the class keyword and our class name is program. This class will have an opening and closing curly brace that defines the scope or the block of that class. Same case with functions. When we define a function, we give the function return type, we give the function name, and we give the function arguments, and that function has an opening and closing curly brace that defines the block or the body of the function. Okay, we haven't spoke about the function and classes, so don't worry about that. If you guys don't know what classes and functions are, don't worry. Just think of classes and functions like a container that contains a bunch of code and statements. Okay, let's define a simple class in our project. To define a class in our project, right click on the project, go to add, and click on the class. Okay, let's call our class scope. Visual Studio defines our class by giving the class keyword and the name of the class, and this class has an opening and closing curly brace which defines the block of this class or the scope of this class. So any variable we define within this class will have the scope of this entire class. Suppose we have int x equal to 100. So this x is accessible throughout from this area to the end of the curly brace. If we have thousands of lines of codes here, so that x will be accessible. So also variables defined within a class, also called as class data member, or also called class attribute. Okay, then we have function level or method level scope. Within the class, as we said, a class can has variable attributes, a variable or attributes, and also it can have method or function or behavior. Suppose this class has a function or behavior that only prints the x value. Let's call it, let's give it a proper name. Let's call it age equal to 10. Okay, and let's have a function public. This function returns nothing, and the function name is show. It's going to show the age or show age. Okay, this function should have an opening and closing curly brace, and we just want to print the age variable. Since the age variable was defined within this block of code, it is accessible to any inner block of code within this class. Okay, if we have inner blocks of code, we can access this age over there. And if within the function we have another block of code, so basically we define a block of code by opening and closing curly brace. We can access that variable here. Let's say age in inner block. Okay, equal to, say, plus age. We can access the variable here. We can change it. Suppose we want to change the age equal to age plus 5. We want to add 5 years to that, and inside this inner block we print that. Okay, but if we have a variable within the function, suppose we have a string and name equal to, say, code with Cougar. Okay, this variable is local to this function. This variable is only accessible within this curly braces, but it is not accessible within the outer curly braces. Whereas any variable defined in outer block, it's accessible to the inner block, but any variable defined in the inner block is not accessible to the outer block. Okay, so this name is not accessible here. If we wanted to, suppose we have a function, another function here, public void, let's call it display, whatever. Okay, let's call it add, or add age. We want to add a number to age. It takes int age, so it basically let's not pass a parameter here. If we wanted to see out age plus 10, so we can access the age variable here. And if we want to access name, which is defined within this block of code, this function, so it's not accessible within this other function. If you wanted to see out name, so name is not accessible here, and the compiler complains saying that the name does not exist in this current context. Okay, because the name has a scope of only this area, so it is not accessible in this area of our application. So that was the function level scope. Then we have block level. As we spoke, this is a block level scope. A block is defined by this curly braces. We have for loop, while loop, do while loop, which has a block or a scope in that. So we haven't spoken about for loop. So basically for loop is used to repeatedly execute a statement or a bunch of statements. Suppose we have for int I equal to 0, I less than, let's say, 10. We want to print age 10 times, cout or cw age. Okay, so this for loop has a block which starts with an opening curly brace and closing curly brace. So if we define a variable here and x equal to, let's say, 20, this x is only accessible within this block of code. It is not accessible to the outer area of this function. Okay, this is the block level scope. I think that's all about scopes. One thing, guys, if we have let's go to our program.cs file. If we have a static function within our class, so the static function cannot access non-static members. If we have int x equal to, say, 10, so this is a member or variable of this class which is non-static, but this method is static. We are not able to access this non-static variable or member within the static method, and it's vice versa also. If you wanted to print x here, so the compiler will give error saying that an object reference is required for non-static field. Okay, we cannot directly access non-static fields or variables within a static member, within a static function. If you guys don't know about the static, so don't worry about that. We'll talk in details about the static. In order to access x within the static function, we gotta create an object of program, so we can use a new program. We create an object of the program class and we access x. Right now we can access or print a non-static member within the static member or function. So this was a basic introduction to scopes in C#. Hope you guys have learned something. In the next videos, we're going to in details talk about other fundamental concepts in C#. Please don't forget to subscribe to Code with Cougar, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.